My name is Mary Cater. I'm a student at Liberty University in Interpersonal Communications, HSCO 508. My instructor is Dr. Sheila Spakes, School of Behavior Science. This is my PowerPoint presentation for the end of the class in Interpersonal Communications. Next slide. My table of content consists of an introduction, background, define interpersonal communication, define conversation, my overarching goal. What is enlarging the conversation? Uniquely you. My behavior blends from the two assessments, uniquely you and the queendom exam, my interpersonal communication. I will give resources and strategies on problem-solving recommendations. I will give 2 supportive articles which involves interpersonal communication. My action plans, conclusion, and bibliographies at the end of this presentation of my resources and material used to produce this PowerPoint. Next slide. Mary is a Georgia native with strong ties to community. I'm the 13th of 14 siblings. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother. I have supportive family members and friends. I graduated as a legal assistant. I have a bachelor degree in criminal justice, currently working on my Master of Arts in Human Services Counseling Criminal Justice. Next slide. My background includes community activist and volunteer. I'm a bailiff in the Superior Court. I'm a state of Georgia licensed insurance agent, a security officer working with seniors. I work with the Georgia Department of Correction Volunteer Chaplaincy Services. 3 times a political candidate. I am a school crossing guard. Most of all, an evangelist. It is important that I build strong interpersonal communication skills. Next slide. What is interpersonal communication? Interpersonal communication happens when people involve talk and listening in ways that maximize the presence of the personal. This definition is not based on the number of people involved in the conversation, according to Stewart. Peterson uses the metaphor example of talker-listener, which is a valuable communication for all parties involved. Next slide. What is conversation? Webster defined it as the informal exchange of ideas by spoken words. Peterson explains that conversation involves obtaining a clear understanding of who is talking and who is listening. Both talker and listener have a responsibility in this process, according to Peterson. Next slide. My overarching goal is to become an effective talker listener with family, friends, clients, evangelism, organizations, community, workplace, ministry. How will I become an effective talker listener? By building on the Word of God. Isaiah 43:19 say, "Behold, I will do a new thing." Next slide. What is enlarging the conversation? Enlarging the conversation can be defined and understood in the sense of keeping the conversation going. Keeping the conversation going involves 2 important goals for the talker and listener, according to Burley Allen. Stewart states that the conversation involves more than one person's idea. Both parties formulate ideas when the message is sent and the other receives it. Effective communication involves connecting to each other. Next slide. My behavior blending from the uniquely you consisted of this is what people expect and this is me. This is what people expect me to act like. Influencing and impressive. Firm, strong, decisive, sure, strong-willing. My I, outstanding, active, promoting, encouraging. My S, diplomatic, peacemaker. My C, conservative, inflexible. Next slide. My uniquely you this. Graft 1, this is expected of me. People expect me to be determined or inspirational, to be tasked and people-oriented, to influence others to help get the job done. People want me to induce and excite others to act. Next slide. My lows. With everything is a high and a low. My low on graft 1 and graft 2, which is expected of me, is to be more passive and reserved. I have a tendency to be demanding, assertive. My I, playful, fun-loving, hyper, energetic, clowning, jovial, reacting. I don't think that's me. We have to keep in mind that from the exam, it also stated that 80% is pretty much accurate, but we do have room for some of it to not be exactly you. The S, pleasing, good-natured, soft-spoken. The C, creative, wondering, pondering. Next slide. This is me. You are both dominant and submissive. Some people mistakenly think I am passive-aggressive. Give mixed messages. Part of your personality that you want to be in control and the other that you don't. I'm patient with small groups. My loyalty and desire to please others make me a trusted friend and worker. It says that you often achieve more in the long run, while others may be here today and gone tomorrow. Next slide. Interpersonal communication skill from the Queendom exam. My overall score was 68. The insightfulness of that exam was my results indicated that I am fairly adept at interpreting people's words and actions, as well as seeing things from the other perspective. With every exam, there's a high and there's a low. This exam produced positive points, and it also gave my negative points and challenging barriers. Next slide. From my positive points, it did say that I adapt at interpersonal conversation with peoples through words and actions. The evidence was that I had good listening skills and strong discernment, and the ability to convert with a wide variety of people. Next slide. My communication barriers. It states that occasionally I pay too much attention to the message I'm sending rather than how it's received. What will I do to improve that? Education. Time and experience will produce effective communication through talking and listening. Next slide. Resources and strategies. From the resources that we used the Uniquely You, which is a graph that tells you this is expected of me and this is me. From the Queendom Interpersonal Community Assessment, it talks about the talker and the listener and how you perceive what you are hearing. Next slide. Resources and strategies provided for the problem solving. Suggested listening to understand rather than to answer. Understanding body languages. Conversing in a quiet place and one with few distractions. Distractions can get you off base. Cut through the listening biases. Use language that is compatible to the person and subject to what you're talking about. Next slide. The two scholar articles that I used to support interpersonal communication skills were from the Psychological Perspectives on Interpersonal Communication, which was really dynamic, and it stated interpersonal communication skills is woven through all aspects of living and meaningful only in the context of living. Effective interpersonal communication skills is directly involved in living. Next slide. From the Effective Interpersonal Communication, a practical guide to improving life. It was proven that safety, love, belonging, esteem comes from the use of effective communication strategies, which can produce healthy talkers and listeners. If you want to improve your life, improve your interpersonal communication skills. Next slide. My plan of action is to become a better level 1 talker and communicating by sending a clear and precise message, to avoid misunderstandings, to build on a strong relationship, to avoid stress, to strengthen confidence in our communication. My next plan of action is to become a better level 1 listener by receiving and sending messages using Burley Allen's concept, listening and inhaling information from the speaker, which will help me to remain non-judgmental and empathetic. Next slide. My final plan of action is to improve my talking and listening. Exhaling, sending messages. Inhaling, receiving the messages with 5 features: uniqueness, unmeasurable, responsive, reflective, addressable, to which describes how communicators engage in the processing of exhaling and inhaling. Next slide. In my conclusion, it is my desire to be a better communicator and to achieve my goal by becoming a more effective talker and listener. I will build from the Word of God foundation found in Isaiah 43:18 through 19. It tells us about God delivering his people. It tells us to do not call to mind the former things or pondering things of the past, but watch. I'm about to carry out something new. Thank you. Mary Cater.